off at number 10, we've got the Gorbals vampire. Back in September of 1954, the children from Gorbals in Glasgow went on a monster hunt looking for the creature that killed their two friends and drank their blood. For 3 nights, hundreds of children between 4 and 14 carried knives, stakes, clubs, and crucifixes and stormed into the creepy necropolis graveyard known locally as the City of the Dead. They were hunting a vampire that was said to be 7 feet tall with blood-red eyes and sharp iron teeth. The children called him the Gorbals vampire. This was actually a real event. On September 23rd, Constable Alex Deeprose was called to the City of the Dead because of a disturbance and found hundreds of armed kids looking for a vampire. Local news outlets picked up the story. Headlines said things like, "Amazing scene as hundreds of children rush cemetery." But the report about the 2 missing children ended up being false. The police heard of no missing children reports at the time. The Gorbals vampire was dismissed as an urban legend, and some say the kids were inspired by American comic books like Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror.
Alright, next up at number 9 now guys, we have the Devils in the Bins. The House of the Bins is an old Scottish ancestral home. General Tam Dalyell was the head of the Dalyell family in the 17th century. Now while he lived there, Tam claimed that every night the devil visited him in his home for a game of cards. He said the devil usually won. Now in retrospect, this might have been a good thing. You see, one night the devil appeared as usual, and as usual the devil and Tam sat down to play cards. This night was different though. This night, for the first time ever, Tam seemed to be getting the upper hand. He was winning. As the game went on, the devil got more and more angry about this. Eventually, when the game looked lost for him, he flew into a rage. The devil then threw a single marble at Tam. It missed and instead landed in the sergeant's pond outside the house. Now for many years people laughed at Tam and dismissed his story as insane. Then, over 200 years later, the pond outside was apparently drained, and what should they find buried in the mud at the bottom but a single shiny marble?
He lost his marble! One marble. One marble? At number 8 we've got Abandoned Annie. The City Chambers is a famous building in Edinburgh, with ancient alleys that run beneath. The streets below the City Chambers are said to be haunted, and they attract psychics, ghost hunters, and mediums. This is because back in the 16th and 17th centuries, this particular area of Edinburgh was hit extremely hard by the plague. The streets used to be littered with bodies and sick people who were banished and left for dead. After the 18th century, the abandoned homes and alleys were sealed, but that doesn't stop people from venturing down there. There have been many strange noises and sightings reported, but most notably a psychic claims to have come into contact with the ghost of a young girl named Annie. Abandoned Annie is a story that began in 1992 after a Japanese psychic called Eiko Gibo went to the close as a part of a documentary on paranormal activity. When the group were touring the area, she came across a room that she at first was too afraid to enter. She said the room had a terrible feeling of sickness, hunger, and cold. But then Eiko went inside the room because she said she was invited by the ghost of a little girl named Annie who had died of the plague. Annie grabbed her hand and said that she had been abandoned by her family and that she had lost her doll. Eiko later went back to the room with a Barbie for Annie to play with, and since then, visitors to Annie's room are told to bring a gift for her. There is now a pile of toys created by people who have visited her room. To this day, people report feeling sick, uneasy, and cold while visiting Annie's room, despite the fact that there is no historical record of any girl named Annie, and the story has been dismissed as a popular urban myth. An urban myth that actually has a happy purpose, apparently. Along with toys, people leave money for Annie, and at the end of every year, the money is counted and given to the sick kids hospital. So far, Annie has raised more than £45,000 for other sick children.
Next up at number 7 now guys, we have the A75. Now that is the name of what's said to be the most haunted road in Scotland bar none. It runs through the county of Dumfriesshire and has been a hub of reports of supernatural activity over the years. It's actually attracted paranormal investigators to it from all over the world. Kathleen Crone is the founder of Mostly Ghostly, great name by the way. Now she said there have been screaming hags, eyeless phantoms, and a menagerie of unearthly creatures witnessed on this famous road. In 1962, perhaps one of the most famous sightings occurred on the road. Derek and Norman Ferguson were driving along the road when a large hen apparently flew into the windscreen of their car. They then saw huge cats and other monstrous creatures pass by them, as well as a phantom furniture van, whatever that is, all of which vanished into thin air. In the years since then, the number of stories has grown to the point where some truck drivers actually avoid the A75 altogether.
Alright, it is time for number 6, the Boneless. The true story of the Boneless comes from the Shetland Islands, a group of small islands off the coast of Scotland, where the inhabitants were once terrorized by a ghostly blob. Yes, you heard that correctly. Stories about a ghostly apparition called the Boneless, and sometimes a frittening, have been whispered toured on the Shetland Island for years now. It's based on an account found in the book Shetland Traditional Lore by Jesse Saxby. Although no one could describe the apparition properly, people called it the Boneless because witnesses say it looked like a giant glowing white blob. Others said it looked like a jellyfish or a slimy white cloud. The Boneless would appear pressed up against windows and it never made a sound. It could move though. Apparently it could move faster than a dog. If you had happened to find yourself face to face with the Boneless, you would cower in fear and often die of fright. There's a story about one boy who was dragged by the Boneless to the edge of the cliff. He described it as smelling like rotting flesh. As he heard the waves crashing below, he grabbed the rocks and hung on for life. The Boneless rolled off the cliff and disappeared, and the boy managed to drag himself back to his home to tell his parents. Next, at number 5, we've got the haunting of Castle Stuart. The story goes like this. The Earl of Moray inherited Castle Stuart from his father. He wanted to rent it out, but he couldn't because the castle had such a bad reputation for being haunted. So the Earl tried to improve the castle's reputation by offering a reward to any man who was brave enough to spend the night in the castle. News about the reward spread and eventually 4 men agreed. A minister, an elder in the Presbyterian church, a local shoemaker, and the last was a large man named Rob Angus. The deal was each of the men had to spend an entire night alone in a haunted room. Once they were inside, the door would be locked and wouldn't be unlocked until the next morning. The minister fell asleep in the room and had a dream about a blood-splattered man who sat down next to him. When he woke up, no one was there. The elder had a similar experience. While he was reading his Bible, the door to the room sprang open, and in walked a man covered in blood. The man drew his dagger on the elder, who fainted. He was found the next morning in complete shock. When it was the shoemaker's turn, he heard the door to the room open. A tall man with hooves for feet appeared in the doorway. The being jumped at the shoemaker and he fainted in terror. He was found unconscious on the floor the next morning. And lastly, it was Rob Angus's turn. Rob Angus was a big, strong Scotsman who said he wasn't afraid of anything. As the servant closed the door to his room, he said, "You will find me as I am, or dead." When the servant returned in the morning, the furniture in the room was broken and all over the place, but there was no sign of Rob. But then, the servant looked out the window and saw Rob Angus lying on the ground, dead. At some point, Rob Angus fell out of the window or was pushed. Various sightings and reports of paranormal activity over the years have given Castle Stuart the reputation of being one of the most haunted castles in the world.
Coming at number 4 now, guys, we have Arthur's Seat Coffin. Coming at number 4 now, guys, we have the Arthur's Seat Coffins. This one comes from Edinburgh. Arthur's Seat is a rocky hill there, sort of a landmark, if you will. One day in 1836, 5 local boys discovered an entrance to a small cave on the rugged northeastern face of that famous hill. There, they found some intricately carved miniature figures set in coffins. I know, that's incredibly creepy. The 17 coffins had actually been left undisturbed for an unknown amount of time. Each casket contained expertly carved human effigies, creepily dressed in very unique clothing. They had painted black boots on and twisted facial expressions. In the years since then, these creepy coffins have defied all attempts to explain them. This has opened the door to a number of creepy urban legends surrounding them. The most popular is that they were created to commemorate the 17 victims of the notorious Edinburgh murderers and grave robbers Burke and Hare. I'm no relation to that Burke though. Okay, maybe somewhere along the line. Awkward.
Getting close now, at number 3 we've got Sawney Bean, Scotland's most famous cannibal. Not much is known about Sawney Bean, but he was said to have been born in the late 15th century. He married a woman who was said to be a witch and moved to Benane Cave in Ayrshire with his new wife. Sawney supported his wife by being a robber, but rather than risk being caught, Sawney murdered his victims and disposed of the evidence by eating the remains. The couple started having children, a lot of them, 14 to be exact, and fed them a high-protein diet of human flesh. Eventually the children grew up and had their own children born of incest, and before long the cave was inhabited by an entire extended family of 48 cannibals, all with a taste for humans. The family remained undiscovered and would ambush unfortunate victims, steal their money, and eat them. Local authorities would find decaying body parts, sometimes pickled, washed up on the surrounding beaches. Eventually King James of Scotland heard about the Sawneys and orchestrated a 400-men manhunt. They found the cave full of human remains and stolen valuables. Sawney Bean was reportedly executed for the mass murder of over 1,000 people, but most historians believe that Sawney never existed, and his story was nothing more than an urban legend.
Moving on to number 2 now, we have Gilly Doo. I think I'm pronouncing that right. In Scottish legend, he's a solitary Scottish male fairy that lives alone in the forest. He disguises himself in trees so as not to be seen by humans. His light green skin and long branch arms make it almost impossible for people to spot him. However, it's important to note that the Gilly Doo is usually only this elusive to adults. You see, he's been known to appear and interact with friendly children. Now you should know that doesn't mean that every interaction is a good one. He has been known to prey on people lost in the woods, killing or enslaving them. Perhaps the strangest thing I read about this creature is that he is said to collect the teeth of children to perform protective magic on them. This has led some people to believe that the ghillie-doo actually gave birth to the legend of the Tooth Fairy, a much lighter story. I think we can all agree. I don't think the Tooth Fairy has killed or enslaved anyone. If you know otherwise, let me know. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Mackenzie poltergeist. This is perhaps the most famous ghost story in all of Scotland. The Black Mausoleum is the name of a tomb in Edinburgh's Greyfriars Cemetery and has become famous as the home of an evil paranormal entity. Over the years, visitors have reported feeling extreme hot spots and cold spots. They leave with cuts, bruises and burns on their body. Photographic evidence for the legend includes pictures of these injuries as well as pictures from inside the tomb that some claim show an unidentified shape. Others have reported seeing a white figure in the dark, smelling strange odours and hearing knocking noises under the ground and even from inside the tomb itself. If that wasn't enough for you, locals have gone to the grave some days to find dead animals in front of the Black Mausoleum. Some people have even claimed to have been possessed, which led to the grounds being exorcised twice, both unsuccessfully apparently. In the past few decades, it seems as though the Mackenzie poltergeist has begun to spread. Poltergeist activity has been reported in 4 different houses around the graveyard, and in 2002 a large fire broke out in the residences behind George Mackenzie's tomb.
Coming in at number 10, we have Bloody Mary. Most of us will know the legend of Bloody Mary. She is a mirror-dwelling ghost that is said to appear when her name is chanted again and again as you stare into the reflection in the mirror. The origins of Bloody Mary go way back in old folklore when ye olde women would invoke the ghost of Bloody Mary to show them a glimpse of their future husband's face. Things could go south if they saw a grim reaper or a skull in the mirror instead. It would mean that they would likely die before they got the chance to marry. In modern times, the legend goes that if you summon Bloody Mary, she appears as a witch-looking woman. If she is angry with you, she'll scratch out your eyes, steal your soul, drink your blood, all of the dark stuff. I'm sure you'll know loads of people who played Bloody Mary as a kid and maybe they got freaked out and convinced themselves that they saw something, but honestly, I never heard of anyone actually getting their eyes scratched out. The mirror ghost is a popular urban legend across the world. In Japan, they have something very similar in the form of Hanako-san. Coming in at number 9, we have the Ghost Pushers of Gravity Hill. In almost every ghostly urban legend video I have done, especially those in the United States, there has been a phenomena of a car being pushed up a hill by some kind of otherworldly being. This story tends to involve a car accident in that very same spot and helpful ghosts who want to save you. One example of the legend will be, say, on a rail track. The legend will say that in this very spot 37 years ago, a bus filled with kids died when it got struck on the tracks. Now, if you park the car there these days and wait, your car will miraculously be pushed over the tracks by helpful tiny dead kid hands. Creepy. Too far? Other versions take place on hills where cars have rolled backwards and caused fatal accidents, only for ghosts to remain in that very same spot. There are legends like these literally all over the world. There's Confusion Hill in California, Magnetic Mountain in Canada, Moonbee in Australia, the Magic Route of France, Hangman's Hill in Essex, UK, so on and so forth. They're literally everywhere. Generally speaking, naysayers will claim that these so-called phenomenon are a trick of the light, like water appearing to run uphill. Coming into number 8, we have walking on gravestones. Have you ever felt a shiver unexpectedly? Well, folklore and urban legend have said that if this happens to you, someone has walked on your gravestone. This suggests that somewhere there's a future in which you're dead and buried, but somehow you feel it right now. The urban legend also suggests that we should never step on another person's grave for this very reason. We may send a shiver down someone's spine or anger their spirit, which may just follow us beyond their final resting place. Honestly, beyond that, it's just kind of disrespectful to step on someone's grave. Coming into number 7, we have the ghost train. A classic ghost train. I'm not talking about the fairground ride, although since Goosebumps there has also been a lot of haunted ride urban legends. When I say ghost train, I mean the ghost of an actual train thundering at breakneck speed only to disappear out of sight. Or perhaps strange headlights in the distance near an old abandoned track, or a smell of a steam engine and a puff of smoke coming from nowhere. There are thousands of ghost train legends. The St. Louis Lights, Stockholm's Silver Pylon, Abraham Lincoln's funeral train, and more. Okay, next up I will see your ghost train and raise you a scary ghost ship. Coming into number 6 we have the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman is the most famous of the ghost ship urban legends, and it dates back to the 1700s, a high time for seafaring. It refers to a doomed Dutch man-of-war ship. Tales of the Flying Dutchman are ingrained in seafaring lore, a lot like that of the Kraken. Many sailors have reported seeing a phantom boat emitting a bright light on a stormy night, and it is a bad omen for seafarers. It's become a very loathsome superstition. The Flying Dutchman has regularly been spotted, famously once by King George V of the UK. Some say that they've spotted the ship in the air, hence the name the Flying Dutchman. Explanations include mirages, looming refraction, and simply hallucinations from fatigued sailors. Ooh, I love number 5. We have a theatre ghost. There's always a blooming theatre ghost, isn't there? Old theatre buildings absolutely always come replete with a ghoul. Is it because of the high drama of the theatre? Does it leave an imprint on the building? Or is it because imaginations are high in theatrical settings? Usually urban legends of theatre ghosts go as such. The spirit of a former performer who either died on stage or in a brawl at stage door haunts the theatre for the rest of time. The ghost is seen by actors on stage as they look out to the audience, or they're felt by patrons who sit down, only to feel a sudden rush of cold air as they go by. I personally love a good theatre ghost story. There is the Phantom of the Opera, who isn't actually dead. The many ghosts of the Theatre Royal Drury Lane in London, one of the oldest theatres in the world. We've got the Wailing Woman of Wellington's St. James Theatre. Judy Garland is even said to haunt the Palace Theatre in New York. Theatre ghosts are always blamed for mischief too. Lights turning on and off, props flying about backstage, things going wrong on stage. Theatre ghosts are usually tricksters and agents of chaos. Honestly, I could stand here all day talking about theatre ghosts. Maybe we should do a top 10 scary theatre ghost stories list. I'd really like that. Coming into number 4 we have the Vanishing Hitchhiker. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is a classic ghost urban legend. In each of the stories, a driver picks up a person thumbing for a lift. They drive them a little way, something spooky and mysterious is said, and then the person in question vanishes. Often, they leave a little clue behind them as to who they might have been. The driver then does a bit of research and finds out that the passenger died along that very stretch of road X numbers of years ago, sometimes to that very day. Spooky. This is such a classic urban legend that most cities have a story like this. In Chicago, for example, they have the Vanishing Hitcher Resurrection Mary. You can hear more about her in our Chicago Urban Legends videos, one of my favourites I've done this year. In Japan, a similar phenomenon is reported with the alleged ghosts of tsunami victims. Cab drivers in Inshinomaki have reported ghost passengers. Do ghosts like cars, or are the vanishing hitchers stuff of legends? Coming into number 3, we have shadow people. Shadow people are popular ghost sightings, and we actually did a whole top 10 on this. Some people have described scary shadows as black mass ghosts, negative imprints left on the world from angry spirits. So many towns and villages across the entire world have reported shadow sightings, with some cultures and tribes believing they are demonic spirits. One of the most famous shadow people sightings include the Dark Watchers of Santa Lucia, dark featureless shadows wearing hats and carrying walking sticks that appear silent and watching in the distance of the Santa Lucia Mountains. Recently, a black cloud was spotted over a mall in Zambia that some people were claiming was a shadow ghost, or a dementor. Was a shadow ghost the contents of our number 2? We have the Ghost in a Jar. The Ghost in a Jar is one of my favourite ghostly urban legends ever. While there have been many stories of spirits being trapped in objects, the Ghost in a Jar story went viral and inspired imaginations across the world. The story goes in 2003, TJ 101 of Arkansas listed a jar containing, I quote, a black thing. The lister said they dug up the jar near a church in the 1980s, and since then they had been plagued by a black shadow. The jar is painted black and red on the inside and is also covered in strange symbols. If the jar is so creepy, why did it take the owner 20 years to get rid of it?
I don't know, but the listing went viral anyway, and somehow the ghost in a jar sold for nearly $51,000 and since has been the stuff of legends. The legend was so widespread and popular, it even became a Rick and Morty character.
Thanks, Ghost in a Jar. You always were good at pointing out potentially obscure comedy.
I feel like the need for a 15-year update on this. Does someone have that ghost in a jar? How does this story end? I need more information. Finally, coming into number 1 of our top 10 scary ghost urban legends, we have the legend of the White Lady. My, if I had $1 for every White Lady ghost I had read about, well, I'd have enough dollars to buy a pretty convincing White Lady costume and go around spooking people and making them think that I myself am a ghost. Anyway, White Lady ghosts are popular ghost tropes and usually have some kind of tragic background of love and loss and searching associated with them. I guess the ghost being in white represents some kind of woeful purity and something unfulfilled. Many are depicted wearing wedding dresses. There are countless tales of White Lady ghosts across the world. In Canada, she is a war widow who threw herself over a waterfall in Quebec City when her lover never came home. In California in the United States, she haunts Calico Ghost Town, a place I actually visited last Christmas. In the Czech Republic, she's the spirit of a cursed wife who haunts a castle. In the UK, she also haunts a castle and has a bounty of hidden treasure. In Malta, she wanders a forest in her wedding dress, and in Germany, disturbing her will get you killed. In Asia, White Lady apparitions are usually much less romantic and far more malevolent and vengeful. So guys, what a spook fest! What is your—
Starting off this countdown, we have Slender Man. According to Reddit user Inub Del Rey, they had an encounter with Slender Man. According to him, this happened back around 2014 to 2015. He was up one day scrolling through YouTube when he stumbled upon a weird video titled Slenderman Sighting 2012. Obviously, he figured it was fake, so he just watched it for fun. It's just a video of 2 people fooling around. In fact, he linked the video for us to watch. But at one point in the video, you can see what looks like Slender Man in the background. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is after watching this video, he heard a knock on his sliding glass door window that leads out to his backyard. He got spooked out and quickly looked out the window, but nothing was there. So he locked the door and closed the curtains. He tried to sit back down and watch something to distract him, but he couldn't concentrate. He felt like he was being watched. He went back over to the door and he claims he saw a tall man in a suit and tie staring back at him. This man had no face and looked exactly like Slender Man. He panicked and yelled for his mom, but the time she got there, the thing was gone. Had he really seen Slender Man? Or was it just a prank? In our 9th spot, we have the Ghost Passengers. And if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. This is a pretty famous urban legend and there are multiple versions out there of it. But it's basically about someone picking up a passenger and in the end, the passenger turns out to be dead. It's a ghost. Well, this has happened to a number of taxi drivers in Japan. After the 2011 tsunami that devastated Japan, drivers claimed to pick up a lot of ghosts of people that died in this disaster. At least 7 taxi drivers have reported this happening to them. They pick up the passenger, they're on their way to the destination, when the passenger says something weird. They look back at them, and they have already disappeared. In our 8th spot, we have the Phantom Bus of London. This one is pretty crazy. The Phantom Bus of London is a red double-decker bus with a number 7 on the side. Legend goes that this bus is driven by a phantom driver and is the cause of a number of accidents. Well, one night a car suddenly swerved and ran into a wall. Witnesses claimed that they saw a ghostly bus driving along the center of the road before it crashed into the car. I mean, if one person said they saw this, no one would believe them. But multiple witnesses saw the exact same thing. Sounds like the night bus from Harry Potter. Just saying. Just throwing it out there. In our 7th spot, we have the Black-Eyed Children. The Black-Eyed Children is an urban legend surrounding, you guessed it, children with eyes that are completely black. They tend to target adults that are alone and will ask for favors like a ride home or to come into their house and use their bathroom or make a phone call. "Please sir, can I use your loo?" No, don't be fooled. Once you let them in, they will kill you. There are so many stories of people claiming that they have seen these demon children. In fact, there's a whole subreddit dedicated to encounter stories. One story was posted by Reddit user Hales Sooks. She claims that her mom encountered 2 black-eyed children. One night, her mom was arriving home from work late. After pulling into her driveway, she noticed a kid walking down the street. She clocked the kid, thought it was odd, but she was on the phone with her husband, so she was a little preoccupied. A couple minutes go by and she finally gets out of her car. That's when she hears a child say, "Excuse me." That child that was down the street was now directly behind her. She stared at the boy but couldn't see his face. His hood was covering his eyes. He asked the woman if she has seen another little boy. The mom knew something was wrong. Normally, she would be willing to help a poor child, but she was getting bad vibes. She kind of brushed off the kid and ran inside her house. Moments later, another little boy appeared on the driveway and the two ran off together. She knows in her gut that those were the black-eyed children. See, this is why children terrify me. Just saying. In our 6th spot, we have the black-eyed children strike again. I'm telling you that these creepy demon children might be real. This story was posted just recently on Reddit by user Antonio. This story happened back in March of this year. He was home alone when all of a sudden he heard a knocking on his door. He looked through the window by his door and saw a small kid standing there. He opened the door and saw the kid had black eyes. The kid then asked to use the phone. He said his dad needed to call his mom. Antonio then asked where his dad was, and the child said that he's right beside him. Literally, there was no one else with him. Antonio finally closed the door, but 3 minutes later, he hears loud pounding on the door again. He looked outside and now the demon is standing there, but this time he's bleeding from his eyebrow. The kid was pounding his head on the door trying to get Antonio to let him in. I'm just glad that Antonio is okay. It could have gone so wrong for him. Also, if I see someone with black eyes, I am dipping so fast. Like, I'm not standing there talking to them and entertaining them. Like, no. In a blink, I'd be gone. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the hook hand. I'm sure you all have heard the famous urban legend about the man with a hook for a hand. He's a killer that escaped from an asylum and terrorizes kids that go on dates in the woods. Blah, blah, you get it. Well, Reddit user Goreback has a pretty terrifying story involving this hook-handed man. When he was a child, he had a friend that lived down the street. The friend always said that he would see an arm reaching around the corner in his basement, but it looked like the arm had a hook for a hand. He always believed that his friend was just trying to scare him. Well, his friend ended up moving away 6 years later, and a new family moved into the house. One of the people living there ended up becoming friends with his older brother. One day, he overheard them talking about how she saw this hook hand appear in the basement. I mean, 2 separate people who did not know each other saw the exact same thing several years apart. And the new girl that saw this hook hand was an adult. So like, what's going on in this house? Is Captain Hook living in their basement rent-free or what? Coming in at number 4, we have the Night Runner. So this is an urban legend that originated in a small town. In this town, apparently there once was a kid that was killed after running out in the street to get his rogue basketball. Legend goes that when you drive down the same street at night and flash your lights, you'll be able to see the boy run out to the street. Of course, this is just a legend, right? Well, this person thought so until he witnessed it for himself. So he was 17 at the time and he was with some friends and they were just fooling around trying to scare themselves. But when they drove down the road, they saw what they described as a shadow or a mist boy dart out on the street. Everyone saw it at the same time and screamed. He has never been back there since. In our 3rd spot, we have the Skinwalker. A Skinwalker is said to be this witch or demon that can turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. And Reddit user Tiger Burrito 12 claims to have seen one back in the day. Also, I love his name, Tiger Burrito. Classic. So when he was in 7th grade, he went out camping with his friends in northern Wisconsin. In the middle of the night, they heard a bunch of rustling. At one point, Tiger Burrito ran out with his hunting knife and flashlight, ready to scare off or catch whatever it was on the campground.
To his surprise, it was just a coyote. It ran off frightened, but this Dumbo decided to chase after it. Don't ask me why. But then he followed it to an old shed. He took his flashlight and looked in, and that's when he saw a man wearing tribal furs, as he described. Tiger Burrito got so scared that he took off back to the campsite. So could it be that he encountered a real-life skinwalker? Moving on to number 2, we have Satan's Hollow. Satan's Hollow is an urban legend from a small town. Basically, it said that Satan worshippers go into the town's drain tunnels to contact and free a demon known as the Shadow Man. One day, Reddit user Mr. Redlegs and his friends decided to see if this was true. They went down to the tunnels and found them covered in spray paint. One of the things spray painted on the walls was an arrow pointing to the chamber, as they called it. The tunnel was also filled with satanic symbols. As they got deeper into the tunnel system, they started to feel uneasy. All of a sudden, they heard pounding coming from one of the walls ahead of them, like something was trying to get out. They got closer to the source of the noise, and it started getting really hot. That's when they fled. So maybe that was the Shadow Man trying to get out. And in our number 1 spot, we have the call for help. This urban legend is about someone who receives a call from a person who is dead. According to Officer Dalton Hostliter, this happened to him. He kept receiving calls from a vacant household. This happened twice a night for a week. The person calling sounded like an old woman. All she would say is, please help, while coughing. Obviously, when they showed up, no one was at this house because no one lived there. Later, it was discovered that the house's last resident was a woman on her deathbed. She died from stage 2 lung cancer. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever had an encounter with an urban legend. Ooh, let me know.